Welcome back to the show. For this month's episode of the 4 Book Club, we have a very, very special guest, author Scott Turow. He wrote the classic 1987 novel Presumed Innocent, which was turned into a hit film in 1990 starring Harrison Ford, and is also a new series on Apple TV Plus starring Jake Gyllenhaal. Now, 38 years later, Turow revisits the characters for the sequel, Presumed Guilty. And for this month's The 4 Book Club, we're sitting down with Scott Turow because recently he's followed up his very, very popular book, Presumed Innocent, with the sequel, Presumed Guilty. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you, Eric. It's nice to be with you.
So, Presumed Innocent, fantastic book. It's hard for me to talk about it because I don't want to give anything away because there's so many twists and turns. Highly recommended that all of our viewers take a look at that. It's also been adapted into, I believe, a film starring Jake Gyllenhaal, if I'm correct.
Yeah, it's now it's currently airing as an 8-part series on Apple TV Plus, and that follows on decades later on the heels of a theatrical release film starring Harrison Ford, which was a big box office hit. So however it's, for whatever reason, this story of a prosecutor accused of murder for doing away with his lover has had that magic of being a multi-generational hit.
One of the things that stands out in this series to me, Scott, is the character development. The characters in these stories are fantastic. They almost jump right off the page. What is your writing process like? Is it, because I hear from so many different writers, and it seems like almost every single writer's process is different.
Yeah.
What's the first thing you do when you have a concept in your brain?
Yeah, that's such a great point, Eric. I think of writers as rock stars, and I love hanging around with them. But when you get to the discussion of craft, you're completely right. Everybody gets to the end point through a different route. For me, I start by sort of feeling my way into an imagined world. I start with a concept and sort of try on ideas about who the people might be in this story. And as that process elaborates, I begin to, to either research or look at, in some cases, like Presumed Guilty, what I've written about that character in the past. That inspires other writing and other ways to sort of fill out my imagination of the situation. I do not do that sequentially. So I will write about one character's relationship with her mother one day, and then I'll come back the next day, and if that's what's exciting me that day, I'll write about a conflict that the character might have with somebody else in the story. And I give myself about a year to create these little bits and pieces. And then after a year, a sense of responsibility descends, and then I have to begin stitching those pieces together into the quilt that is the first draft of the book. And then from there, things are relatively similar to the way other people go about this business, in the sense that I get feedback from all kinds of people, starting with my editor and my agent and my wife, and the draft evolves.
Scott, for any of our readers who have already read Presumed Innocent, or maybe seen the film or watching the series, this is almost required reading. You gotta check this story out for yourselves. Where could someone go to pick up a copy of Presumed Guilty?
Well, if you're asking the author's advice, his first choice would be that you go to your local independent bookstore.
Yes.
and enjoy the experience of being there and touching the books and seeing what else might interest you and buy it there, because independent stores are vital to the intellectual life of this country. You can also go to bookshop.org if you want to buy online, and some of the funds from that purchase will also go to help independent stores. And beyond that, of course, this is a New York Times bestseller, so you can find it pretty much everywhere, including the various online vendors. I personally stay away from buying books from Amazon, but that's up to your listeners to do what their conscience dictates.
And Scott, if someone wants more information on you as a writer and just wants to kind of follow your journey, what's the best way to connect with you, sir?
ScottTurow.com, and there are 3 T's in the middle, ScottTurow.com, 1 R, 3 T's.
And if you didn't have an opportunity to jot that down, no worries, because as always, for all of our book club entries, we'll have all the links you need to both pick up your own copy of Presumed Guilty, as well as to connect with Scott. It's all going to be available after the show today over on 9and10news.com.